Sometime later, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "This month is to be..." Okay. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "This month is to be the first month of the year for you. Tell the people of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, the head of each family must choose a lamb or young goat for the family to eat. If any family is too small to eat a whole animal, they must share it with their next door neighbors. Choose either a sheep or a goat, but it must be a 1-year-old male that has nothing wrong with it, and it must be large enough for everyone to have some of the meat. Each family must take care of its animal until the evening of the 14th day of the month, when the animals are to be killed. Some of the blood must be put on 2 doorposts and above the door of each house where the animals are eaten. That night, when the animals are to be roasted and eaten, together with bitter herbs and thin bread made without yeast, don't eat the meat raw or boiled. The entire animal, including its heads, leg, and insides, must be roasted. Eat what you want that night, and the next morning burn whatever is left. When you eat the meal, be dressed and ready to travel. Have your sandals on, carry your walking stick in your hand, and eat quickly. This is the Passover festival in honor of me, your Lord. That same night I will pass through Egypt and kill the firstborn son in every family and the firstborn male of all the animals. I am the Lord, and I will punish the gods of Egypt. The blood on the houses will show me where you live, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. Then you won't be bothered by the terrible disasters I will bring to Egypt." Moses said to the people, "Remember this day in the month of Abib. It is the day when the Lord's mighty power rescued you from Egypt, where you were slaves. Don't eat anything made with yeast. The Lord promised your ancestors that he would bring you into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Hivites, and
Jebusites.
It's a land rich with milk and honey. Each year during the month of Abib, celebrate these events in the following May. For 7 days you are to eat bread without yeast, and on the 7th day you are to celebrate a festival in honor of the Lord. During those 7 days you must not eat anything made with yeast or even have yeast anywhere near your homes. Then on the 7th day you must explain to your children that you do this because the Lord brought you out of Egypt. Your word, O Lord, is a lamp to our feet,
A light to our path. In our household, in evening reading prayers and reading the scriptures, etc., the kids used to love this part of the Bible where we have all the plagues, etc. And maybe I'm very irreverent, but I used to add my own little bits to them as we went through. And so in telling the story, I embellished them. But I pointed out to the girls that there's a sense of the story and the movement of it is important. And sometimes the content can't always be subservient to the content of others. And we had this thing, because as each of the plagues come, there's this phrase that occurs over and over again, and all the animals died. And so I added my own bit. The next time, after the next plague, and all the animals died for a second time. And all the animals died for a third time. And all the animals died for a fourth time. And all the animals died many times over. But as you read the scriptures, being mindful of what's there, is it the actual facts of that, or is it what's being told? What's the story and the meaning behind those things? So why does our worship need to provide story and reflection? In my time here, worship may have changed slightly from how it was before. I'll go back a bit. We've got an election coming up in America, and when I say we because it seems like the media believe that we're part of it also, whether we want to be or not. When it comes to the political debates, whenever there's an election, are you interested in hearing what one side of politics is saying they don't like about the other side's politics, or are you interested in hearing what their actual policy is? Oh, that's okay. We'll come back to that one after. There's nothing more annoying than just listening to people saying, I don't like that about their policy, I don't like that about their policy, they've got that wrong, that's terrible also. And that's what we end up with often, and we just turn off and we stop listening. But if someone says, hey, our policy is different because we do these things and we do these for these reasons, then we actually want to tune in, we want to listen to it. Within the Christian church, we've come to a point where many of the people within the life of our churches don't articulate the Christian faith. They've lost the art of telling the story, and some of that's been caused by ministers who go, well, it's my job to tell the story, it's not yours. Where ministers have said, I don't like having all these Bible studies in my church. If I can't be there running them, it's really just everyone sharing their ignorance and they should cease unless I can be there. I understand the Holy Spirit equips us with gifts and the ability to understand and interpret, and the message we get today might be different to tomorrow, and that is okay, and it doesn't need a minister there to tell us what has to be interpreted. But there's this sense that the importance of telling story is really key for us to relearn again so that the Christian faith is carried on and makes an impact in people's lives. And when I say the Christian faith being carried on, the world doesn't want to know, a bit like politics, what you don't like in the other person's policies. The world doesn't want to know what you don't like about another church. The world doesn't want to know what miracles in the Bible that you don't agree with for whatever reasons. The world doesn't want to know all the things where you've got something that you say, well, yeah, I don't worry about that bit and I don't worry about that. The world actually wants to know what it is that makes you believe that you belong to Christ, and the world wants to know what difference does it make in your life. And the importance of relearning to articulate that story. We can say to people, I don't believe in the virgin birth, or I don't believe in the resurrection, or I don't believe in whatever. But that makes no difference to someone's life, because the person you're talking to, chances are they're going, well, I don't either, so what difference does that make? The world doesn't want to know that you've got a new building with extensions. The world doesn't want to know that you've got a new fancy coffee percolator. The world doesn't want to know that you've just got a new $15,000 grand piano in your church. We haven't, have we? No. Glenn's standing up. Those things that seem important to us aren't important to the world. Those who drive up and down the street don't go, oh, wow, look at that. But if we can tell the stories of the difference God makes in our life, that makes a difference to other people. And they go, hey, I want something of what they've got in their life. I've talked often about how the way the church has gone, parents have abdicated their responsibility of sharing the faith with their children, and they've passed it on to the church. And often the church has been silly enough to say, hey, we do a better job of educating your kids than you do. But parents today outsource the bringing up of their kids to everyone else. We need professionals who can look after them from when they're born until when they can move out on their own. And the role of family is reduced, and the place of family is where story belongs. Having worked for so many years with children and young people, I can tell often where children are as part of the family when it comes to telling stories. Do children only tell stories about what they've done and the games they've played and those sorts of things, or do the children carry a sense of family stories that they tell, even if they weren't born when it happened, they tell the story as if they were there and they're part of it and it's their family story, and one person starts telling it and the next one dives in over the top to correct a bit and someone else adds their bit, etc. Then I know that there's a sense of the family and the story continues, and that those young people are part of that family in a very real way. When it comes to faith, many people feel ill-equipped to share the story. And in a day and age where everyone has a right to their own view, and truth and fact are different things, and you can believe what you want and you can put it all together and make up your own faith package. In a world where that's very much the case, for some reason, when it comes to the Christian faith, we feel as though we don't have a right to say what we believe and why we believe that and the difference God's made in our life. If you had a chance to look at the article in this week's Connecting Community Notices, and if anyone watching elsewhere would like to receive that, just drop an email into the Hobart North Uniting Church. You'll find us on the web or on Facebook, and we can link you in with that. But the article talked about where people have gone. It talked about some of the COVID times and looking at where it is. And it actually said that the faith of people in the 50 to 65 year age group is actually far weaker, and they have less hope and belief than any other age group. At a time where we look at those people and we think, hey, they've actually got it together, they've sorted out their lives, they know where they're going and what's happening, they're the people who are struggling most with, what do I believe? What do I do with it? Where do I go? How do we help them articulate it? The other interesting thing that came out of that National Church Life Survey information was that people will go and belong to a church long before they care what that church believes and exactly where they appropriate their theology. And so that sense of belonging, that sense of inclusion is so important. A place where people can tell their stories and shape their stories and reshape their stories, and for those stories to become different. I'm an extrovert. I think out loud. Because I say something today as something that it sounds like I've suddenly thought of, it may be something that's a thought that's forming, and tomorrow it may be different. Other people carefully form their thoughts before they ever open their mouth. Oh, if I had that wisdom. But what do we do for those who don't have a story to share? How do we help them to be part of the story? The church sees itself as sanctuary, as safe haven. COVID-19's clearly taken that away, as people have gone, I no longer feel safe. And some of the statistics I was looking at this week say that we're likely to lose a third or more of people from the Christian faith who stop attending worship services, still believe in God, but attending worship services drops off because of COVID-19. What are the dangerous stories that we tell of our faith and our faith stories that keep us alive? What are the things as Christians that give us hope, that call us forward, that connect us to the mission of God in God's world, that make a difference in other people's lives, not fixing other people's lives in a paternalistic way, because we probably need them more than they need us, but what is it that we can do that makes a difference in other people's lives? Got a 1.5 minute snippet of Michael Frost, who's an Australian missiologist from Sydney, who is quite a powerful speaker, and he's talking about some of this. Let's hear.
For us, as exiled, as it were, Christians in a post-Christian experience, what ought we to do but to fall back upon our most dangerous story of all? Not the story about the day when our church had a choir of 500 people, or not the great stories about how this church used to be packed one day, or not the stories of nostalgia like the good old days growing up a Baptist in, Georgia somewhere. Nostalgia will move us nowhere. But we go back to break bread and to drink wine, and we tell this most radical and dangerous story, that God, that Yahweh, inhabited flesh, became one of us in order to redeem us. The most radical and dangerous story that we have is the story of the gospel. And we tell it like it's a kid's bedtime story. There should be no such thing as children's bedtime story Bibles, right? I mean, imagine that. Okay, honey, and then Jesus said, I hate your mother and your father. Good night, off to sleep now. And then he said, now go and sell everything and give it to the poor. Good night, sleep tight, darling. Imagine these kids like, These are dangerous stories, are they not? That actually Yahweh, King and ruler of all, considers it possible to inhabit human flesh and to live among us.
What are those dangerous stories? The story we heard today was the story of the Passover. And we're not going to go in and talk about the lambs and the killing of people and all that sort of stuff. We'll leave that stuff for another day. But what I want to focus on is that every time when we celebrate the Lord's Supper, it's a reenactment. The story we receive is one that was a reenactment of the Passover. And as Jesus took part in that story, as he lived out that story of remembering that deliverance from bondage and that escape out of Egypt, and that God is the one who delivered the people, regardless of what metaphor or circumstance, the promise of the Passover offers freedom from bondage, release from captivity. The grace of God's message is one of deliverance and freedom. Yet we have here before us empty plates and empty cups. For today is World Communion Day, and in the 5 years I've been here, or this is the 5th year, so this would have been the 5th time we celebrated World Communion Day here. A day where people around the world celebrate as one. And regardless of how you see the Eucharist, the Lord's Supper or communion, whether it's a meal of just remembering what happened, whether for you the elements of bread and wine actually become the physical embodiment of Jesus Christ in that way, or you sit somewhere in between, or you're confused and you don't really care what it is, it just tastes good and it's a good interaction in worship. Through telling the dangerous stories of what happened and how God was present to God's people, it's made tangible in the bread and the wine. It becomes part of our story that we do this too as we remember the past and the stories handed down. And we understand something more of how God meets us in the mystery of life, as God liberates us and gives us a hope and a future. There's 2 things I'd like you to take from today's message. In the Old Testament, we had a group of people trying to figure out who is God. And they discovered God as creator. And we have those things of creation, from the plants in the garden to the stars to the story of people at the heart of creation. And so God is creator, and God is also liberator. God is the one who rescued them from bondage in Egypt. In the New Testament, we have our own Passover story. We have the Easter moment, and that defines us as the people of God, as Christians. God is Jesus, and so not as only is God creator and redeemer, God is also incarnate. God is part and parcel one of us in Jesus, and God is Jesus, and God is the one who raised Jesus through death to new life in a new form. The church are the ones who remember, who retell the story. And they retell that story in relationship to the Old Testament. I can't tell you how many Christians tell me, I like the God of the New Testament, I hate the God of the Old Testament. The story is one story. It's a complete story that continues on. Those who know God as creator, as redeemer in the Old Testament way, find that place of freedom also in who Jesus Christ is for us, in that newfound life way, as God comes amongst us, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The promise of hope given through Jesus and the promise of hope that is Jesus. What was the name that this one was to be known as? Emmanuel, God with us, God Creator, God Redeemer, God with us. Who is our God in the Old Testament? I am who I am. Who is our God in the New Testament days? God is with us. Neither of those answers give us the full story. There's a lot we have to fill in, and that's our job, to tell the story. There's a couple of Bible verses here out of the Exodus that shows the place and importance of children in this telling of the story. On that day, your children, tell your children, I do this because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. Can we translate that into modern day? We tell our children because of what God has done for us. This observance will be for you like a sign on your hand and a reminder on your forehead that the law of the Lord is to be on your lips. For the Lord brought you out of Egypt with his mighty hand. You must keep this ordinance at the appointed time each year. That's what Jesus was doing. In days to come, when your children ask you, what does this mean? Say to him, what a mighty hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt and out of slavery. Can we in the same way tell the story to our children and our children's children and others we encounter, the difference God has made in our life? And it will be like a sign on your hand and a symbol on your forehead that the Lord brought us out of Egypt with his mighty hand. Where has God delivered you from? What is the story within you that needs to be told? Don't need to bash people over the head with the Bible, but my fear is that the Christian church is getting to a point where it'd be next to impossible to bash people over the head with the Bible because we don't know the stories and we don't know, or if we do, we don't know how to tell them. Don't be afraid of bashing people over the head with the Bible because it's not going to happen, but don't be afraid to tell the stories.